Fiscal Commission. It's 6:01, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'll note we do have a quorum, but we are missing, I see Commissioner Sapatikov coming in. So the ones who are absent are Commissioner Murabayashi, Vaitla, and there's one more. And Garrettson, yes, thank you. Okay, so I'll move on to item 2, approval of the agenda. Do we have any comments, or is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, that's approved unanimously. So we'll move on to item 3. Do we have any brief announcements from staff?
Good evening, Commissioners. Just a couple of brief announcements. The first is that we are in full swing in budget season. As you will see before we do have the mid-year budget update for fiscal year 26, but we are really quickly have moved on to fiscal year 27 mid-cycle budget updates. So we're working on that, and that will be coming to Council on the 19th. So a little bit of a discussion point later on in the meeting for the Commission as to whether or not they want to form a or call a special meeting to go over the budget at some point thereafter. Staff is currently still working on the fiscal year 24 year-end close. We have finished our formal interim audit with our auditors. So we're still working on through some of the open items to get that completed, and then we continue to close, and then as soon as we can schedule final procedures to get working on the financial statement and the single audit.
For which year?
Fiscal year 24. There were a couple of items that just missed agenda publishing. The memorandum on internal control and required communications to council from the auditors was completed on Saturday, so I was not able to get that into the agenda as a result. So we will bring that back likely at the June meeting for you, and then we will wrap fiscal year 23 and send that off to council for receive and file. I think that is all I have for announcements.
Thank you, and for working on Saturdays. Amazing. Okay, any announcement from commissioners? Okay, so we'll move on to item 4. Is there any general public comments? So that will move to item 5, the consent items, which consist of 5A, the minutes from the April meeting, and B, the Q3 treasurer's report from fiscal year 25-26. Is there any discussion or a motion?
I move to approve the consent.
Okay, do we have a second?
Chairman.
A second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, we have one abstention from Commissioner Harper, and ayes from the rest. So that item is approved. And we'll move on to item 6, the regular items. And it sounds like we have a 25-26 mid-year budget update.
Thank you, Chair. This presentation and report were presented to council at the April, seems like a million years ago at this point, first April meeting. So I'm just going to go a little bit faster since we're all seasoned professionals. Stop me or slow me down at your will. And I hit the end button, so go to the next one. Okay, starting off with the general fund summary, what you're seeing here is a table that shows the general fund, starting with beginning fund balance, going through the revenues, expenditures, operating results, and fund balance. And then in the columns you have the adopted budget, the original adopted budget, the revised budget, which includes open purchase orders from fiscal year 25 that rolled into fiscal year 26, and the year-to-date actuals as of December 31st, 2025. So you will note that our revenues or actuals are showing significantly lower than budgeted. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but that is normal with a lot of the different types of revenues that we have. During budget adoption, staff had projected a general fund reserve ending balance of 11.5%. Through the update for mid-year, that number was reduced to 8.9%. So this change is a result of finalization of prior year financial statements, specifically fiscal year 23. Prior year encumbrances being rolled forward. Again, that's that difference between 97.9 million in expenditures and transfers out to 102 million. So that also contributed to the decrease in fund balance. And then the net effect of proposed mid-year adjustments. You will notice I'm being a little bit more descriptive with tables and charts. So this is something that we are going to be required to do going forward to be in compliance with the American Disabilities Act. So stay tuned, this is going to be a thing going forward. This table is a summary of our general fund revenue. The different revenue types are the row descriptions. The first column is our revised budget, showing a total of 95.5 million, or 95.6 million, excuse me, dollars in revenues. 24% is what, on the third column, what we have received actual to date as of December 31st, 2025. The largest part of our revenue source is sales tax, followed closely by property tax. And then other revenues, which include transient occupancy tax, business license, cannabis franchise fees, and real property transfer tax. Now, small hiccup there. Motor vehicle in lieu is also a type of property tax. It's actually property tax in lieu of vehicle license fee as a result of part of that rebalancing of state budget that occurred a few decades ago, where they moved around monies to the state's, I guess you could say, benefits. In order to balance the state budget, they moved around what they allocated to local agencies. So if you include the motor vehicle in lieu and the property tax, it's still second place with property tax holding up the coming in behind sales tax.
And Alberto,
Yes.
municipal service tax, that's the tax that's on the monthly utility bill?
Correct. So that one, as well as the park maintenance tax, actually the municipal service tax, I believe, is not the one that's on the monthly bills, but the one that is on your property tax bill. So the park maintenance tax and the public safety tax are the ones that are on your utility bills.
Please jump in.
Oh, please.
Sorry.
So, close, the park maintenance tax and the open space tax are on your property tax bills. The municipal services tax and the public safety tax are on your utility bills. So a little bit of an interesting setup there, but those have been on the bills for, I don't know how long, pre-218.
And those assessments on the property tax bill they're not general fund revenue, they're a specialized or special fund.
Thank you. Apologies, I'm still getting some of these down. I discussed a little bit before in an earlier slide, the timing of revenues is a little unique in the world of municipal finance. Property tax is received 3 times a year, with our first distribution coming in January. So really there's very little property tax that shows up as of December, that would show up as of December 31st. The high 90% of it showing up following mid-year. Sales tax is received 2 months in arrears. So as of December 31st, we had received sales tax through October. So that 4 distributions of sales tax instead of the 6 that under accrual basis when we would come back at year end and accrue those final 2 months. Business license, another fun one that renews in January, so we don't see too much business license applications or renewals ahead of January. The grand majority of our business license shows up following January 1st. And then franchise fees, some of our larger franchise fees don't show up until Q4, such as our cable franchise fee with, don't know, can't remember off the top of my head who the cable provider is for data, I believe it's not, is it Comcast? The cable provider for Davis does not remit its franchise fee until the final quarter when it gives it to us all at once.
Alberto?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. On property tax, does the city do its own analysis or estimate to create the budget for property tax, or do you just, I've had a little bit of experience with this with the special district, and it was always very unsatisfying because we'd ask the county, well, what are you budgeting for a property tax change this year? And they'd give us a really not a great answer, and then it feels like it's a giant black box. But has the city been able to fairly well estimate through the budgeting process what the property tax revenue ends up being, or do you have the same challenge that our special district experiences?
Davis contracts with HDL, who's a very well-known property tax consultant. They do lots of different taxes. They also are our sales tax consultant, and they provide forecasts for us as to what the changes are going to be for property tax, sales tax. Also, our cannabis tax auditors. So they do a wide variety of services, and Davis does contract with them for a couple of things.
And they're found to be fairly good at making those estimates. I know the cannabis thing is going south for everyone, but at least for property tax and sales tax, it's pretty good estimates that you receive.
Yeah, there's a couple of major players in that space. HDL is pretty much used, I would say, by the majority of agencies in the state. To your question, they are fairly well regarded and respected.
Can I just ask about dates? Fiscal year is July 1 to June 30.
Correct.
This is data through December 31st?
Correct.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. So this chart shows a comparison of property tax and property tax in lieu of vehicle license fee from fiscal years 22 through fiscal year 26. And these are what our projections are for fiscal year 26. So the fiscal years 21 through 25 are the actual numbers for property tax and motor vehicle license in lieu. As you can see, these are fairly steady. There's steady growth on property tax as time goes on. Generally, assessed valuations for properties in the city limits upon which property tax assessments are based grows. As you are no doubt aware, Prop 13 limited how much property tax can grow year over year. So the county is limited to either a CPI type index or 2%. For motor vehicle license fee, they're based on similar valuations. Also, generally modest growth year over year. Now, the big things that affect property tax are when you have property transfers. Say someone purchased a home 30 years ago at $500,000 and they sold it this year for $850,000. So from the time of its initial sale to current, the valuation is based on $500,000 plus that incremental growth year over year. When that property changes hands on the following fiscal year, you will see that property being assessed for $850,000 instead of the generally lower amount. Sales tax is a little bit more volatile. The city's Bradley Burn sales tax, the 1% that all cities get is that blue section at the bottom of this chart, which shows the sales tax and transaction tax from fiscal years 22 through the projection for fiscal year 26. The green blocks represent Measure O for fiscal years 21, 22, 23, and fiscal year 24, and most of fiscal year 25. Measure Q became effective in April of 2025, so we got about a quarter's worth of Measure Q, so there is that spike there. We are projecting for Measure Q to come in at 23 million and a half for fiscal year 26. This is a slight reduction of for overall sales tax. We are projecting a slight reduction of $100,000. It's about a third of 1% difference. So we budgeted fairly close to what we project is going to be the actual for sales tax. This chart is kind of a smorgasbord. It shows both business license, transient occupancy tax, and cannabis tax for fiscal years 22 through current fiscal year 26. As Commissioner Rink noted, cannabis has been showing a steady decline. We are reducing the projected revenue for cannabis from 1.7 million to 1.2 million. On this front, we did have one of our vendors closed, our partners closed. Additionally, Woodland and Wilson also brought dispensaries online, increasing the supply, so bringing down the specific demand for our own dispensaries. While cannabis statewide is up slightly, Davis is showing that decline, including on our cannabis-based sales tax. So there's been a decline there as well. For transient occupancy
Can I
tax,
ask a question about cannabis?
yes.
Sure. So one of the issues with cannabis is businesses that aren't following all of the tax laws but are still operating. And after Prop 64, there was less enforcement against some of those businesses, even if they're not following Prop 64, following the laws. So you just mentioned the reduction in demand because Woodland and Winters, I think you said.
There's a reduction in demand to ours.
2 hours, right. People are coming to Davis because they can go closer to home, presumably. I wanted to ask, has anyone figured out how much of this is also business being taken away by cannabis businesses that aren't following the tax laws?
We don't have any figures or information to substantiate what that impact is to our potential tax base. There are varying there's information out there with various degrees of credibility that address that, but there's nothing that we have at the moment that would substantiate what the impact is.
That's one point I just love the city to look into. And being the generation I am, it feels very strange to suggest that the city government encourage people to go to cannabis businesses. But if there were a way to make it clear which businesses in town are doing things the right way, I suspect people would like to shop at businesses that are doing things the right and legal way. They may not know, and sometimes they don't care, but some people may be going to businesses that aren't following the licensing and tax rules because they don't know. And if there's some way for the city to make it clear which of the cannabis businesses in town are actually following the rules, maybe that helps a local business and also helps with tax revenues.
That might be something that we can take a look at to see if we can find some resources. As I mentioned, we do have a contract with HDL to do audits of our compliance businesses, but perhaps they also have a facet of the business that looks into non-compliant businesses.
Are you suggesting that storefronts that sell cannabis might not be complying by the law? I figured the city would be all over them for that. I mean, I get that the black market stuff, you can't control that, but you're not suggesting that there's storefront businesses that aren't following the rules.
No, I think anyone you just listed are dispensaries because there's a pretty small number in town. You know who they are and you know whether they're following the law. I'm talking more about education for consumers, because if consumers have a choice between black market and a business that's following the law, like I say, some consumers don't care and you're not gonna reach them, but there may be people who are buying cannabis not paying the tax. And if they knew that that has an impact on the city, maybe they would go to one of the businesses that is a storefront that is doing things the right way.
And just to insert, because I work in cannabis tax law for most of my day job, there are absolutely storefront retailers that are not compliant.
Yes,
Mhm.
I agree. So Alberto, did you indicate that there are some auditing being done of the cannabis?
Yes, there, so we have done a few audits of our licensees. Initially, when we brought HTL online, we were doing an audit of every single one, every single year. We're revisiting that methodology. We're not sure that it's 100%, the return on investment is there. But we still do have HTL under contract to do those audits.
Now, are they allowed to participate in the banking system now, or are they still handling everything via staff?
Actually, I know that one. There's a progress in Congress right now potentially for legalizing bank access.
Okay.
As far as I know right now, the legal situation is still that it is unlawful under federal law and no one is enforcing those laws. So the banks are not every bank will bank cannabis, but any dispensary can find a bank that will bank them right now. The banks are willing to take the risk after more than a decade of, at least some banks are willing to take the risk after more than a decade of non-enforcement.
Good. So do you know if ours are all in the banking system or not?
I do not know.
So I was hired to do an audit of 3 dispensaries for one of my city clients, and basically it's unauditable if they're not in the banking system. There's no records to verify that their accounting is justified, and so we suspected that there was blatant underreporting of revenue because there was nothing to test. So I would encourage you to require that if they can get in the banking system and they're not. That would be a big risk for us.
And when I meet next with HCL, I'll inquire as to whether or not we can include that as a scope item.
Very good.
And just to be clear, any business we have licensed, I would strongly encourage a policy of grace and forgiveness, because this legal world is a thicket, and helping them to comply. And then the ones that aren't licensed and aren't complying, well, that's tax revenue we're losing. It'd be great if we can help push some of the cannabis businesses toward the businesses that are at least trying to do things the right way.
If I can just add, when we started the cannabis industry regulations here in Davis in 2019, we did have several of the businesses, they would bring in duffel bags full of cash. It was, to your point, a little bit awkward. That has changed over the ensuing years, and it does seem that it is much more, I'll call it professional at this point. I do believe all 3 of the dispensaries currently operating do have banking options. It usually seems to be like credit unions. That seems to be a more likely option for them. The other thing I would note from the past audits that have been done for the cannabis businesses, the ones that are still existing and operating, I would say are good operators. There's been occasions where we've owed them money and occasions where they've owed us money, but nothing that has been terribly problematic. Then there are other ones that are no longer operating, and I'll just leave that there.
Continuing on to the transient occupancy tax, as you see on the chart, there is a dip between 24-25 and 25-26. That is the budgeted amount. We're leaving the projection as is for that particular revenue source. I also want to point out that in fiscal year 24, we received $400,000 in COVID era revenue that was out delinquent, so that kind of spiked the chart a little bit. Otherwise, it would be a little bit smoother. Business license tax, has been steady, and we're projected to end up pretty close to budget as there as well.
So why do we think TOT is gonna fall?
We're seeing lower revenues between fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 26. Our actuals as of December were not necessarily, they're more or less on target. I did not do the forecast, the initial forecast for fiscal year 26, so I'm not sure if that was an industry forecast where my predecessor saw a potential for a decrease there. The actuals are bearing out more or less to that particular forecast. That's
Okay, so,
about the best I could do it. They are fairly, TOT is coming down a little bit according to some of our regional neighbors. We are seeing a little bit of a decrease in travel from the prior year, so potentially that could have been part of it.
I would also add that we have a couple of hotels that aren't performing as we thought they might. And so that, we don't have that many hotels to begin with, so when a couple are underperforming or performing less than what we thought, then that does draw down the average.
Question. Have I'm wondering if the hotel operators have talked about what might be going on to cause that underperformance here in Davis relative to other places.
I think the best way for me to answer that is to say that there's different hotels operate at different price points and therefore have different types of customer bases. And there are a couple of hotels that just aren't, I'm trying to say this without divulging confidences or anything, that just aren't getting the types of overnight stays that we would have hoped. They're catering to a different clientele. And you know, if somebody stays more than 30 days, for example, then they're not going to pay TOT. So, thank you.
Any other questions on this slide? Which brings me to our special tax revenue. As I was very recently reminded, I do not have these straight yet, so I apologize in advance. But this is public safety tax and park maintenance tax that are,
Public safety tax is on the municipal services bill, and park maintenance tax shows up on your property tax bill. It may show up as landscape and lighting district, but it's parks maintenance tax.
Also part of the public safety tax is public safety sales tax. So park maintenance tax has a 2% escalator built in. That was approved by voters as when that particular measure entered. So as you can see with these ones, there's also this particular chart showing special tax revenue from fiscal year 22 through fiscal year 26 do show steady, albeit calm growth year over year. Construction tax revenue construction tax is generally collected at the time building permits are issued. The 217,000 is actual, what the actual collections were as of December 31st. So we can end up a little bit higher than this, or we opted to be extremely conservative with this particular revenue type, as it is completely susceptible to when building permits are issued. And when I say building permits, I believe it is the certificate of occupancy. So collection, the completion of construction is at the point of time at which this tax is collected. That was the revenue. Moving on to the general fund expenditures. This particular table shows.
I'm sorry, can we go back to that
Sure.
slide really quickly? I just wanted to talk about the decline. Are we expecting that 25, 26, that fiscal year 26 will be back up to that rate, or are we expecting that that will be a big decline from the prior 3 years?
As of right now, I believe our current projections for it are anticipated to be a significant decline from prior years.
Do we know why?
So we probably have over a dozen projects that have been through the entitlement process and could be ready to go. They're ready to go from the city's standpoint. Those projects, it's up to the owners of the property and the project to determine when they're ready to go under construction. Financing is difficult, and I expect that a number of those are working to put together their financing packages. We had overestimated in the past 2 fiscal years, we had overestimated how much development that we would bring in or see over the course of the fiscal year. And we wanted to be very conservative with it for this fiscal year to try to kind of right-size that. Because when we estimated that we would have development come in, we budgeted those revenues for our own capital projects. When the private developments didn't materialize, we were going gangbusters on our own capital projects. So we need to make sure that we're not spending the money we don't have. We're hopeful that projects will come in, but as the finance director said, we are trying to be very conservative and not over assume that we'll be seeing anything. So you won't be seeing a high estimate for construction tax revenue for the next fiscal year either.
General fund expenditures. This particular table shows general fund expenditures by department. The first column is the revised budget. That was the initial budget, or not the initial budget, that is the revised budget following the rolling in of the prior year purchase orders. The actual to date for the budget to actual expenditures is 42% as of December 31st. There is a vacancy factor budgeted in fiscal year 26 for $2.6 million. We're reallocating that out to the departments. $350,000 of it is being allocated to internal service funds, which is moving out of the general fund, but will then be filtered back in as the internal service funds distribute their costs across the funds. So again, the prior year encumbrances and also included in this amount are $1 million in net proposed adjustments to the general fund expenditures. So that was a summary. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with the general fund expenditures. Before I do that, the proposed revenue amendments for the fiscal year 26 mid-year adjustments were an increase of use of money and property of nearly $1 million, $0.8 million. This is largely due to investment income being better than budgeted. That had been budgeted extremely conservatively, so we're bringing that up to closer to what we believe actual will be. Other revenue increased by $0.1 million. That includes rental income for social services, affordable housing unit management. That's going to be offset by increased management fees. Charges for services, we are projecting an increase of $0.2 million. Motor vehicle in lieu, property tax in lieu of motor vehicle license, we are projecting an increase of $0.1 million. We are projecting, as I mentioned earlier, for sales tax a decrease of $0.1 million. For cannabis, we are projecting approximately a $500,000 decrease from the budgeted amounts. And then from the non-general fund, we are projecting an increase in state grant revenue for $0.1 million for the Central Park project.
For property tax in lieu of motor vehicle, does that mean house assessments were higher than we expected? Does it mean more cars were sold than we expected?
That's a really interesting question because, you expect property tax and to be fairly stable, but again, you do get assessments in between special assessments in the middle of the year that will sometimes affect that. So if you do have a property sale in the middle of the year, or if any of you remember the last time you purchased a home, you probably got a supplemental assessment shortly after buying your home or property that would be an adjustment made for that. For the proposed expenditure amendments, on the general fund, as I mentioned, we're reallocating vacancy savings of $2.6 million across the departments, with the exception of 350 that is being reallocated to internal service funds. We requested, and the council approved, transfers out increases of $540,000 for Russell Boulevard Corridor Improvement Project and facility maintenance. Facility maintenance is what includes the county barn cooler, the gate at 1818 5th Street, Veterans Memorial Center roof. These were primarily to cover project funding shortages for prior years. And the final for general fund was other program expenditures increasing by a net $129,000. So that includes uniforms and cancer screenings for our fire department, utilities and trailer rent increase for the engineering department, and $50,000 for the parks department for sports field revitalization at Community, Royal Westwood, and Walnut Parks. And in other funds, our proposed amendments were for property management and maintenance costs of $138,000 in the affordable housing funds, and a $300,000 allocation for YOLO bus prior year invoice that they was received in the current year. I'll pause for questions.
For the increase, the transfer out increase for like the Russell Boulevard improvements and like the other projects from prior years, is that just because like the cost of those were higher than expected?
Yes, they're largely the result of these were largely the result of cleanup of fiscal year 24 projects, that some of which are completed and just need to have the funding wasn't all there for them, so we need to allocate some more funding in order to close out the projects. Sure.
With the Russell Boulevard project in particular, we had assumed a greater amount. We partnered with the university on that project, and we've assumed a greater amount coming from the university than materialized. I think more our error than theirs. I'm not trying to say anything negative about our campus, but that did pose a budget problem for the project when we went to close it out. Thank you.
Okay, and this chart is a summary of all funds, revenues and expenditures, and the net activity. The funds are categorized by the type of fund they are. So just focusing on the general fund, that first line, we are at 23% of, we have 23%, I keep wanting to say percent, it's $23 million dollars as of December 31st that haven't received the $95.6 million revised budget. And then the expenditures were at $42.9 million as of December 31st versus the $102 million revised budget. The details of these funds were included as attachments 1 and 2 to the staff report. So for each, there was a detail by each specific fund. The net activity currently in the general fund is a deficit of $19.7 million. Again, this is based on the activity right at December 31st and does not account for the late revenues that the city has received since then. For the capital project funds, these typically for these types of funds, we will accumulate resources in order to use them for larger projects. So we will see positive net activity for those funds in various years building up to the commencement and carrying out of those projects, in which case you start seeing deficit spending where they are using the funds that were saved up for those particular projects. Pause for any questions on this slide. So now the takeaways from the major takeaways that I would like to call out from this presentation. First of all, most of the general fund revenues, taxes, and fees are coming in at or above expectations, with the exception of cannabis tax. Our general fund expenditures are generally within budget. Our citywide expenditures by department are also generally within budget and within acceptable ranges at this time of the year. Our ending balance for the general fund was projected at the mid-year update to be 8.9%. And the final line to call out is that the general fund is operating at a structural deficit, meaning where we have higher expenditures than we have revenues. Staff is working to address this. We have been working on this in the build-up to the mid-cycle budget. We will have options then for council to address some, if not all, of the structural benefit would be great. Structural deficit for the general fund.
So I will mostly take the invitation to pick this up in June, but I do want to say some of the news recently has been really alarming, just in terms of what's happening in the world, the financial news, and especially when you read between the lines on certain financial news. And I wanted to call out today some news stories about the agricultural sector, where NPR had a story, Media Matters has a story collecting local and trade press. But what they're saying is that farmers are not getting fertilizer the way they have in years before. And this is relating to the war in Iran and the strait being closed and the trouble with petroleum being an important factor in fertilizer specifically. And I don't want to belabor the point, but the agricultural sector may be hit particularly hard with what is happening in the world right now. Obviously a very important sector for our town. So I just wanted to flag, there is greater volatility right now and a lot of reasons to be nervous. I really appreciated the presentation we got, maybe it's 3 or 4 months ago, that helped explain that city revenues often track pretty well with the economy. If inflation goes up, then property taxes and sales taxes go up, yay. But I would still want to be very cautious right now. And the fact that we're dropping to a balance of 8.9 when we're supposed to have 15% reserve is really concerning. I said my piece, and we can pick it up in June when you present options to us, but we're very interested.
I'd also just like to add a deep concern in spending a lot of time with these documents. It is concerning to me that we dipped into that reserve at all, because it seems very clear in the documents that that's not what it's intended for. So I think there are just so many questions layered on top that I think are also about culture of spending, because of course balancing the budget is both about revenue and about expenditures. But even in these documents, I'm seeing things that are concerning. So we have this huge structural deficit, and then in the mid-year change, we had a slight revenue increase and an even larger expenditure increase. So that just to me signals crisis, actually. What are we going to do to fix this problem? And the feeling that I have gotten is not a crisis feeling, right? It's we're gonna come back with some recommendations, which I understand, and I get that you're new to this job also, and I appreciate that. But being new to the Fiscal Commission myself, I am kind of shocked and very concerned about what I'm seeing in these documents. And I want to help as a commissioner and a citizen, but what I'd like to be able to talk about here is how can we help? How can we help with whatever would be helpful, whether that's understanding public perspectives, gathering information, understanding more about forecast or risk, which has come up before. But this feels to me just like something we need to be taking extremely seriously as a commission.
I think that's well said. I concur as well. And, you know, coming on the heels of a measure that is increasing revenues to the city and we're moving in the opposite direction doesn't really augur well.
I had a question, I had a couple of questions. You said in the takeaways that taxes and fees are at or above expectations. When I scan the percentage that actuals are of the budget for actually revenues and expenses, none of them hit 50%. You'd expect 6 months into the year we'd hit 50%. You explained some of those, property taxes and franchise and business licenses, but none of them hit 50%. On the expenses, none of them hit 50%. So how are we analyzing this to say that everything is looking like it's within expectations?
For the most part, what we do is we take a look at our actuals, and we take a look at what the pattern was for the prior year, and look at some of the transactions on the prior year that took place later during the year, and see whether or not we are following the track. So some of our fees and charges were a little bit lower than we expected. For some of them, particularly like our parks items, we saw that they were within range, and those particularly come in at the tail end, especially when we have the summer classes starting in late May and June. So we felt confident that those particular ones would come back up to where they needed to be by the time the fiscal year ended. So that's kind of the process we took to analyze the different fees, charges, and taxes as we saw them at December 31st, and then forecasted them out for the fiscal year.
So are you budgeting on a cash basis?
I don't know that I would say that hedge basis. I don't really like the word hedge. But what I would say is that we're looking at trends and reviewing whether or not they're following historical trends as far as where they are and where they end up.
So when I asked that, so some of the explanations in here indicated that some things we collect after the end of the year, and so there were some August collections that aren't going to be collected within this fiscal year, but it didn't appear that the August collections from the prior year were included in the actuals. Is that, do we have somehow a rolling catch up of the transactions that are related to prior year, or how do you handle that?
Well, typically, as long as the funds are received or the revenue is received within a period of availability, we will accrue it back to the fiscal year that it belongs to. Does that answer your question?
So I certainly understand it from a financial statement basis. I'm asking about the budget specifically. So if something comes in August of this fiscal year that we're in, but it related to something that you earned in the prior year, are you showing it in this report?
It would be part of our forecast for the ending. So it wouldn't show up in the actual. The actual really only shows activity strictly between on a cash basis between July 1st and December 31st.
So if you collected it in cash, even if it was related to the prior year, you would show it here in these actuals?
Correct. If we were looking at it, not for December 31st, right? But if you mean as part of like the prior years, so for fiscal year 25, anything we received in July and August was removed out of the actuals and placed to fiscal year 25.
Can I get my understanding of this, see if you correct me? I'll do sales tax. Someone buys something on June 15th. Sales tax, assessment return, whatever, happens in July, and sales tax comes in July, okay? That will apply to the fiscal year that had the June in it, because that's when the transaction happened, not July when the tax came in. But someone buys something in December for the holidays, okay? Sales tax return in January. The money comes in January. That's not on the documents we saw today, but it does belong to the 2025-26 fiscal year. It just didn't make it onto these documents, right?
Correct. So anything received in August of 2025, which is the current fiscal year, we would have zeroed it out of the current year and moved it to the prior year. Anything we received for December sales won't show up until February, or
Right.
didn't show up until February since we're now in May, but did not show up on the actuals.
And so 40% kind of makes sense because things that come in August get put to the prior fiscal year, but things that came in February aren't on here yet. But they sort of belong to December.
So personally, I find this very confusing. I think I would recommend that first of all, that you budget by quarter. So you got seasonality, you got things that happen only in the second half of the year, only in the third quarter of the year. And to try to compare an annual basis to this show, I mean, it's very hard to see if we're on track. But if you budget by quarter and then we look at it and say, okay, we didn't expect any property taxes to come in by December 31, then that comparison will make sense instead of what we're seeing. So you're probably doing it to some level anyway, but I think in terms of showing it to the city council and to the commission, it would certainly be very helpful to see it broken out by quarter. Secondly, I would recommend that we budget solely on cash basis. You don't spend anything but cash, and it gets really confusing if you have accrual basis decision-making going on when you're trying to budget how much you're going to spend. So the purpose of the budget is just for planning expenditures. So to the extent that you're backing out things that are related to the prior year, I'd say that's probably something that isn't worth the effort.
And let me give one other alternative. If we're at 42% on sales tax, or whatever number it is, and the reason you feel comfortable with that is last year we were at 41%, the year before we were at 43%, and it's about where we've been, it'd be helpful for us to see that too. So if you're using prior years as a peg to say, well, sales tax is in line with prior years, so that's why we feel comfortable that our projections are in line, give us some of that information to help us assess that makes sense, or at least tell us that's why.
So you indicated there's salary savings. So as I understand it, you're budgeting all positions as if they will be filled for the entire year.
And then we use we have a line item for a vacancy factor.
You do. So you're backing out part of that. And so what is the percentage that you're backing out?
It's about 4%.
4%? And you still have salary savings?
We anticipate that there may be additional salary savings on top of that, yes.
But that's what you're talking about when you're saying in the analysis that you're allocating to the other departments and 350,000 to internal service funds. Is that additional salary savings? No.
No, the 350,000 is a portion of the $2.6 million. Then the $2.6 million at time of budget was allocated in the general fund. However, a portion of that, we reallocated it to an internal service fund that holds salaries as a result of the savings in that particular fund.
So the 2.6 million is the 4%?
Correct.
Okay, and is that close to what we expected to come out in, or will there be additional salary savings?
We think there will be more. We cannot quantify how much more at the moment.
Yeah, my experience is that somewhere between 5 and 10% is a normal for vacancies for the year, just because of turnover and how long it takes to fill open positions. So I would expect there would be more salary savings. So two questions related to that. One is, since we have significant salary savings and we're under our reserve goal, why aren't we allocating the salary savings back into reserves?
Ultimately, they will end up in reserves if they flow through the expenditures and revenues when we close them out to fund balance at the end of the year. But you're suggesting we directly allocate to reserves?
Mm-hmm. Especially additional salary savings. I mean, if you already had a plan for how to allocate that 4%, and you already assumed that you would have that savings and knew what you were going to do with it, fine. But if you have additional salary savings and we're under reserve, shouldn't the additional salary savings replenish our reserves?
That is an interesting suggestion, and it potentially could be something that would work. I will come back to where we're not currently in a cycle where we are on a normal cycle, so we probably won't have those numbers until this time.
Well, you said at the
8 to 9 months ago.
mid-cycle update. What does that mean, mid-cycle?
So the mid-cycle is the adjustments made to the fiscal year 27 budget.
And when is that?
That will be what it is presented to council at the May 19th meeting.
Because it's almost not mid-cycle when you're almost to the end of the year.
So we have a 2-year budget, so it's just the second year of the 2-year budget, that's all.
So instead of doing
There's
Oh,
mid-year and mid-cycle, it gets very
Oh,
confusing.
okay, all right, thank you.
instead of doing the full budget, we do mid-cycle adjustments to the budget we already created for next year.
Okay, got it. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying follow-up question? I remember seeing in the documents that there were increased overtime costs. And I had assumed that that was related to the savings in staffing, but can you help me understand kind of how those two pieces fit together?
The increase in overtime costs which are primarily for our police department, and they were also primarily grant reimbursable overtime. So it wouldn't actually have that much of an effect on the general fund.
Okay, got it, thanks.
But as I mentioned, this was presented to council at their second April meeting. It feels like a long time ago at this point. Council authorized the amendments, and so the next steps for them were for the mid-cycle adjustments to the fiscal year 27 budget and their May and June meetings. I don't know if we want to talk about that now with the commission, or if we want to wait till a little bit later to discuss whether or not the commission would like to call a special meeting to receive the mid-cycle presentation shortly after the May 19th meeting and before the June 3rd commission meeting.
I would like to absolutely have a special meeting. Yeah, I would also agree.
Can I just ask, what will you ask us to do, or what will be the ask to our commission commission at the special meeting if it happens.
It's challenging that we were not able to get this to the commission ahead of the May 19th meeting. So it's to be similar to what we're doing now, is that we're presenting it to the commission and requesting additional feedback. Now, the full purpose would be to have the commission take a look ahead of the June 2nd meeting where typically the city does its budget FAQ with the council.
I think, to put a finer point on it, will we be asked to make a recommendation or to give some information, or is it just informational?
So, okay, the city council usually does a three-part budget process. We do an introduction, then we have the discussion at subsequent meetings. They've had a little chance to digest it, they may have questions, and then we have the final meeting where hopefully they adopt the budget. And there may be amendments or requests for changes at any point along that process. What we would hope for from this commission is that we release the budget or introduce the budget to the council first, always. But as soon as possible after that May 19th introduction, the ideal would be if this commission was able to have a special meeting to review what had been proposed in the mid-cycle budget update for FY27, and then you provide recommendations to the council about we think you should do something different than what was proposed, we think these proposals are fine, whatever it might be. And then ideally we would have that information to be able to take to the council by that June 2nd discussion, so that the June 2nd council meeting, so they can have discussion with that information available to them. The challenge honestly is just generally one of scheduling and whether we can get enough of you together to have a meeting. But what I have found in the past, and I assume the council members would agree, is that having that additional feedback from this commission is very helpful, because you are going to be able to look at things and provide them with questions, concerns, kudos, whatever it might be, in a way that they're going to be able to utilize to be able to make their decisions. So they'll take the commission's input, staff's input, and input that they receive from the general public, put all of that together, and then make their own decisions. Does that help?
Definitely, and if the commission has particular questions for us, they can certainly ask them on May 19 and give us that direction. And just, it's helpful, I guess what I'm saying, it's helpful when we get the materials, probably about May 19 it comes to us as well, to know if there are any particular points that we're being asked to make.
So the packet would be released on the Thursday before the 19th, so the 14th. And the proposed budget is what the proposed budget is. You wouldn't get a different document than what the council would receive. So you can digest it at that point and see whatever questions you might have or input you want to provide. And I'll just add that there have been years where the commission was not able or perhaps not interested in having a special meeting, couldn't find something in that time frame. In those cases, even having a subcommittee that is appointed to go and go off and work and read through the budget has been helpful. So that's another option if a meeting is not possible for you.
Is there any world in which the timing around this can be set in advance so that we can make sure we have a fiscal commission meeting? I mean, because it seems like giving feedback on these budget elements should be a key function of the commission. So it seems like we should be organizing around that in the future.
It's always dependent upon your schedule. We can certainly have here's when the intended special meeting is, but part of one of the agenda items this evening is to ask you for your availability for different dates. So I can't do anything to change this year because we're asking now.
No, I understand.
But going forward, sure, we can build in a date.
The more time we have to think about these steps, the easier it
talking about, should we do the scheduling discussion right now, try to pick a date?
Actually, maybe just to like stick to the agenda a little closer, let's like wrap this presentation up and then we can do public comment and then we can revisit that. Did you have more slides, Alfred, on this presentation? Was that the conclusion of it? Okay. So first, is there any public comment on this item?
Before I make my prepared public comment, I'd like to address two of the points that Heather brought up, which are really, really, really good. When you all, not everybody was here in May of last year, April of last year, when BAE came and gave the fiscal analysis of Village Farms, one of the things, the points they made, and it's in writing in their report, that the city's costs have historically gone up over 4% per year, and its revenues have only gone up between 2 and 2.5%. And there's a really good reason for that. And this addresses a lot of your crisis thoughts, Heather. The 95.6 million of revenue that's put up there, or even the 102 of expenses, is really only a small portion, or not small, it's only a portion of what the real need is. In the budget, in the forecast section, there is reported over $200 million worth of unfunded liabilities just for capital infrastructure. And what I would suggest from my experience of having been in your place on that side of the dais is that not only does the budget say this is what we can do because state law says we can't be spending any more money than we have revenue, but also put in what the need is. So it's going to illuminate the crisis. Alberto has inherited a whole lot of this, so he's in just as difficult a situation as you are, if not even worse. So the suggestions are really good, but the reality is that I was talking to two people who know a great deal, and we can ask for a whole lot of things, but right now he's trying to catch up from years that are behind in the audited financial statements. So balancing asking for more with just trying to get the basics done is a very difficult thing. Your second point is with regard to the construction tax. I sat there and listened and heard two things, or thought two things. One is interest rates are going to come down, and I have heard that the Hibbert project has found its funding and is actually going to be moving forward. So a lot of what we're seeing is a result of the financial markets, which we don't have any control over. Something that we do have control over, though, is that our entitlement costs, construction tax and all of the other entitlement fees, are set up, and were set up a long time ago, by the lot. So if we look at what our needs are from capital projects, and we only get the tax and we only get the fees if the project actually goes forward. But if we end up with large lots and $1 million homes versus two smaller lots and two $500,000 homes, what you end up doing is doubling the $60,000 a year of entitlement costs to do the two lots. You end up with the money not coming forward as a result. But thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, with that, maybe we should wrap up the special meeting consensus. Do we feel like I think I'm totally down to have a special meeting. That seems like an important piece to review and give feedback on. Okay, well, it sounds like from those of us who are here, there's a consensus that we would like to do that. Was the best way to just send out you sent out like a doodle before to get scheduled, or should we just pick a day while we're here?
If you have a date available now, I think probably the best dates would be that same week, so the 20th, 21st, 22nd, to allow for staff to build the commission's recommendations into the following staff report. Yeah, scratch the 22nd, the 20th, and the 21st.
The 22nd is a Friday before a 3-day weekend.
Yeah.
That probably won't work for you all.
20th is a Wednesday, so that seems, maybe it could work best.
Yeah, 20 or 21st works.
20th works for me.
I may have to leave early. I will try to make it at least to start.
20th is good.
Okay. 20th, it sounds like a week. And the only caveat may be that this room may not be available, we'll have to see, so you may need a different location. I think that's what we did last year, we were in that small room. Okay, awesome, thank you guys. Moving on to 6B, for single audit report presentation.
That is also me. It's a very heavy dose of me today. So this is the single audit report for fiscal year 23. Just a super brief simplification of what a single audit is. A single audit is an audit of all federal program expenditures in the fiscal year. It is called a single audit because instead of having each of these programs, federal programs, audited separately, they are audited together in one report, a single audit report for multiple federal programs. For fiscal year 2023, the minimum threshold is $750,000 in federal expenditures. That is going to go up. I believe it's fiscal year 25, and we'll see that turn to $1 million. That's not going to make much of a difference for us. We'll probably still need to have a single audit for the foreseeable future until that goes up in the tens of millions, which probably won't happen. But one of the terms you will have noticed in the report multiple times is major programs. The major programs are selected by the auditors. They're typically the largest programs or the highest risk programs that are utilized by an agency. So for us this year, that was our federal transit cluster, which is a COVID-19 group of federal transit agency awards, and then the state and local fiscal recovery act funds, which is also known as ARPA money. So just a summary of what's in the report. The city expended $9.2 million in federal grant funds. $3.5 million of that was passed through to other agencies. The overarching majority of that is to an agency singular, being Unitrans. There was one finding for fiscal year 2023 related to the federal transit cluster funds, where the auditors found that we need to do more towards our administration of our sub-grantees. Correction of this finding is in progress. We are cautiously optimistic that in the administration of the fiscal year 24 sub-award to Unitrans that this may be corrected, and if not, then ideally by fiscal year 2025 report. Also included in the packet was a summary schedule of prior audit findings, as SPAF. So this report provides the status of prior year audit findings. For the report issued this year, there were prior year findings for fiscal years 22, 21, and 2020. The way the report is broken out is first you have financial statement findings, and then you have single audit findings. So there's a little bit of a mix in this particular schedule as to what it displays. So that you will notice, for example, for fiscal year 22, there were 8 financial statement findings listed on the report and 9 single audit findings. Following the issuance of the agenda packet for the Fiscal Commission, we submitted the single audit report to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse for fiscal year 23. And as I mentioned earlier during my announcements, also following the issuance of the Commission packet, the MOIC and the required auditor communication reports were both finalized by the audit team. So that will be coming at a later date. The recommendation for the Commission today is to receive the city's single audit report and summary schedule of prior audit findings for the fiscal year ending 2023. So just to add a little bit, as Commissioner Spasnikov has stated previously, and staff has stated previously, these reports are valuable in that we're looking at what we can do to improve things. However, these are for transactions that occurred in fiscal year 2023. So a lot of these findings are going to remain on subsequent reports until we catch up. So with that, I will open it up to questions.
Do you have any clarifying questions?
Can you remind us what the schedule is for getting the rest of the audits completed?
Yes, so the fiscal year 2024 audit is scheduled to be completed by the end of summer, and the fiscal year 25 one was scheduled to be completed by the end of fall. Actually, I think the 24 one may have been scheduled for this month. We are not going to make that early thing for fiscal year 24. We are working on a revised schedule that will be part of the June presentation we'll be taking to council for budget.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
Clarification on Heather's question. When is the memorandum for the current one that this single audit is here? When is the memorandum of internal control and the auditor's statements, the other 2 parts of the total, going to be available?
They will be presented to the commission at the June meeting.
Do we know what's in those, in terms of the number of material weaknesses and number of significant deficiencies?
I do have those reports, so we do know. I don't have the information off the top of my head.
And are there new ones? I mean, we've got carry forwards from the ones that we can see.
Right.
Are there also new ones?
I believe there are a few new comments on the financial statement findings, as well as the one single audit finding.
So again, recognizing you're new in this role, and of course these things are very much in the past, they do seem to point to a long-term problem around control of finances, timeliness, perhaps culture. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, coming into this role, what your vision is, not just for addressing these material weaknesses and deficiencies, but really building a healthy and thriving finance department.
My first vision is to keep all of my staff for an extended amount of time. Staff turnover, especially in the finance department, has been something of a continual issue at the city. There's also been turnover in key departmental staff that at one point or another have been responsible for some of the administration of grants. So there is that portion. There's quite a bit of improvements we can make from an internal control standpoint, as from a process standpoint. Some of that will also be assisted when we're able to get fairly modern enterprise resource planning system installed. So unfortunately, that is second on the priority list behind catching up the audits. We are working towards being an organization that communicates and gets its required things done at a minimum on a regular basis and on a regular schedule. It will take some time. But I think, just to add a little bit more, I think the team that we have in place now is all fully committed to getting us there. The other departments are extremely eager to assist and have been very kind in offering their assistance and cooperation with getting us to where we need to be.
Alberto, have the auditors met with the city council?
They have not met with the city council since I've been here. I don't know if they have not met the city council recently.
And have they met with this fiscal commission?
I don't. If you're asking that question, I would imagine that the answer to that is
Well,
no.
certainly not in the 4 months, 5 minutes that I've been on it. So do you know why? I mean, it's very typical for auditors to meet with the elected body that they are responsible to report to. Is that something the auditors don't want to do or something the city doesn't want to do?
I think since the pandemic, a lot of agencies stopped doing that. I know, for example, Citrus Heights didn't have its auditors present to its council in the 3 years I was there. The Citrus Heights Water District didn't have the auditors presenting after fiscal year 2020. So some agencies just have not had the desire to have the auditors make a presentation. Certainly, the auditors would be happy to meet with the commission or the council if
So
requested
the city council is ultimately responsible for protecting public assets. And they, one of their key tools is to have an independent auditor look in detail at those assets and the internal controls and safeguards against the loss of those assets. And we're in a situation where there are weaknesses in internal controls, and therefore council cannot possibly be comfortable that they are meeting their fiduciary responsibilities. So the auditors, in my opinion, need to meet with the city council, probably should also meet with us. But my strong recommendation is that we schedule the auditors to meet with the city council, especially since we've got so many issues, and there needs to be a direct communication and not a filtered communication from the auditors.
At the commission's pleasure, we can request the auditors come in and give a presentation.
Should we consider making an official recommendation on that, or is that something that we should just?
My comment on that is, I think I really want that, but I want to see what they have to say about 2025 at least first. If we're going to get a 2025 audit this fall, because what I imagine the discussion will be is, here's a list of weaknesses that are represented in these audits. Have they been corrected? What are best practices now? And if we have the time, the question is, how urgent is this?
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I would generally agree with that, but so you would expect to meet with the auditors annually.
Right.
And so we haven't done it, so do we wait another year to do that? And that's what it would really be if we wait until 2025. It'll be at least a year before that happens. I don't think we should wait. I think that isn't important enough that we should have that happen.
I mean, the question I want to know is, how are things now? And I don't know how to get to that.
Well, here's my thought on that. The auditors, although they're looking at prior year numbers, they're in the city currently. They're in looking at getting information from the current system, working with the current staff of people, working with the current, systems and accounting records, and they'll have insights into how things are going. Plus, they'll have insights into what has already been fixed or addressed in terms of these things that we're seeing after the fact. So they'll have lots of insights, even though they're focused on numbers that are in the past.
And is it your experience that they share those insights with us, though?
Well,
All day? Besides
they're-
beyond what's in the report?
That's a very good question. They probably will hedge in terms of giving anything that sounds like an opinion, but a frank conversation with the auditors is what you're looking for. Will you get it? I would hope so, but I don't know for positive.
What would you need from us in terms of if that's something we want to try to have happen with the commission?
We can, here's a suggestion, the commission can take it or I'll take it. Perhaps we take a look at, we use 24 as a midpoint. We see where 24 lands on when we actually issue it. If it's within the commission's reasonable time frame that the commission, if it's soon enough, perhaps the commission can use that as an opportunity to discuss a particular fiscal year as a midpoint, bridging us between 25 and 26 getting done. The other option, if the commission wishes to go sooner, is we can look for a time when the auditors can come out and speak to the commission sooner than later.
Let me flip one other thing, which I've raised before, but given the tone of this conversation, I'll raise it again. Do we want to make an audit subcommittee so that a smaller number of us can spend a little bit more time with the papers on a table, develop a set of questions so that we do this better? And I think the answer last time was, let's wait till all the audits are in and then see if we need to do that. But if we're talking about meeting with the auditor and starting to press, well, how are things now? Maybe we want a subcommittee of our own to decide how to approach it.
I understand that request. The question is, and I was going to ask this when we got to item D on our agenda, is do we have the authority to set our own subcommittees and decide what we're going to look into, or are we beholden to look at things that the city council directs us to look at?
I think we can tell the council that we would like a subcommittee, and then the council votes on whether we get that subcommittee or not. But if we ask for one, I imagine a decent chance that the council will let us do that.
Kelly, as you're about to answer this question, can you also remind us what our abilities are to meet, like how many people can be on a subcommittee legally?
Okay, so I think there's two questions. One, can you have the auditors come to a meeting of the commission? Yes, assuming the auditors are available and can do that. We might have them Zoom in, so they might be here virtually, but we can do that. I don't feel like you have to ask council for permission for that. That is something that's really in your purview, and that would just be a matter of coordinating with the auditors and finding a date that works. If you wanted to recommend, I think I heard a recommendation or suggestion that the council hear from the auditors, you can absolutely also recommend that. You can't tell the council what they're going to do, they have to decide, but you could make that as a recommendation that you think something that would be prudent and important. If you want to do a subcommittee for some purpose or reason, then you can have up to 3 members on a subcommittee, and you go off and do whatever that subcommittee has been charged to do. If it is something that is within the purview of the commission, things that you're already supposed to be working on, you don't need to ask for special permission from the council. If it is a project that you wish to embark on, particularly a project that would involve staff or staff time or other resources of the city, then that's what we go to council and ask for permission for. Council needs to say, yes, we want the commission to be using those resources to do X, Y, or Z, or not. Does that make sense? Yes, to answer your question.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I appreciate the suggestion from Michael. What if our approach is to hear from the auditor and then decide about this subcommittee, or yes on subcommittee, no on subcommittee? I think all of the commission members, I certainly
Want to be on that subcommittee?
I do too.
Well, I don't know if I want to be on the subcommittee. I want to hear the presentation. I don't want to outsource it to a couple of members of the commission. Now, maybe we hear the presentation and it's going to be, hey, yeah, let's form a subcommittee and they can do the deep dive on this in the future, and maybe the full commission here's a truncated version of what the subcommittee worked on. But I would like to hear from the auditors. And I think the suggestion for the fiscal year 24 audit report is kind of the vehicle to come before us is a good one. And Alberto, if you indicated that you think that would be completed by the end of the summer, that's not too far down the road.
That sounds reasonable to me.
Is that what you said at the end of the summer, or you said that's going to change?
That is my current estimate.
Okay, I like your suggestion.
That all sounds reasonable, so it sounds like we've sort of circled around asking to have a presentation from the auditors for the...
Perhaps at the September 2nd meeting.
That sounds... That's super helpful.
So we need a motion and
We need a motion for that? Okay.
to receive for the item.
Oh, to receive the, okay, yes. So
So-
motion to receive the report.
I'd just like to say that without the memorandum of internal control, it has the significant deficiencies and material weaknesses. I'm not ready to accept.
If the commission please, we can move this to this June 2nd meeting when we're all presented together.
Let's do that. Do you need a motion for that, or that's, okay. Well, with that, I think that concludes item 6B, and we can move to item 6C. And thank you, Alberto, for giving us so many presentations tonight. We appreciate it.
It's my night. All right. As part of the budget process, staff goes through and updates its user fees and charges on an annual basis. A little bit of background, the fees and charges may be updated by the change in CPI without council action, as the council has previously authorized this. For the current year, the December CPI, which is what is used for determining what the change will be, was 3%. So any changes over 3% need to be brought to council and also require a public hearing. Fees and charges then become effective 60 days after council authorizes them. So as part of the process, departments will review their fees and propose changes. If they have any fees or charges that they would like to raise over CPI, or any new fees they would like to add, or any fees that they would like to remove.
Alberto, on your first bullet, what is CPI-U?
CPI-U is one of the
Is that like a
CPI
regional
factors.
CPI?
Mhm. So it's the Western, I don't know the title 100% off the top of my head, but it's the Western United States. We use specifically the San Francisco Hayward Oakland metro area factor. So there are different factors for different parts of the United States, and even different metropolitan areas. There's not one for Sacramento, which is why we use the San Francisco Bay Area one. So I am going to go through a highlight of some of the major changes, some of the changes over CPI, and some of the new fees by department. So first for Public Works, for the fees that there are certain fees that they increased over CPI due to new technology. These fees are the fire hydrant use and inspection fee, the lost fire hydrant meter fee, and the lost backflow preventers. What I mean by new technology is that the meters that are now being used are much more high-tech than the ones that were used to calculate the prior fees. The new ones have all the fancy technology that allow readings to be done instantly, readings to be done in real time, to provide even our residents and customers the ability to have more up-to-date and faster reporting on their utility usage. The fire hydrant meter is a construction meter that developers or construction crews can use. They attach it to a fire hydrant, or rather, city staff attaches it to a fire hydrant. These are they are not loaned out, but they are assigned out, and then the developer pays for the monthly meter and also the usage that comes through the meter. So now instead of sending someone to read what the usage on it, or from my Citrus Heights water days, until we got the meter back, we didn't know what the usage was on it. So this allows for the city to bill regularly on those construction meters. There were fees also increased over CPI to improve cost recovery. So those were largely the hourly rates for our city staff. So the different staff members where you see the fees where you see a title and then a rate, those are the ones that were over CPI were to improve cost recovery. For new fees proposed by Public Works, there is a BAC-T test, which I'm told is a bacteria test for water quality. So this fee is being requested to recover staff time and lab costs associated with running these tests on behalf of customers who need them. A road closure inspection fee is also set to recover staff costs. Stormwater quality inspection fee is also set to recover staff costs. The next set of fees is the Parks and Community Service fees. Parks had a new fee study commissioned that was presented to the Fiscal Commission at last month's meeting. This is the first new fee study completed for the Parks fees and charges since 2016, so a little overdue. The changes that Parks and Rec has proposed were developed through the fee study, and they reflect an appropriate level of subsidy for the commissioners that were not able to attend last month's meeting. The level of subsidy is determined by the Parks pyramid pricing model, which determined the level of importance of the type of activity versus how much of a general fund subsidy they are recommending be provided for that particular fee. For example, swim lessons are something that is considered a high public value, and so those would be something that would be considered, they would request a higher general fund subsidy than something like, say, a park rental, like a park space rental. The fees also allow for a flexibility to adjust fees, and additionally, there are fees that are not required to be on the master fee schedule that are being removed off the schedule. So those are the ones that you see that say removed, see the park activity guide. The last set of fees, yes, was for lease fees. So there were some fees increased over CPI, and these again were to better align the fees to provide for better cost recovery. One of these was extra duty police security costs, and the fees were recalculated based on the latest MOU with the Davis Police Officers Association. The other one was the noise and street use permits, which again were recalculated for salaries to improve cost recovery for the city. These fees are going to be presented to the council at the May 19th meeting. And the staff is requesting the council's review of the proposed fees and to recommend adoption of them to the city council.
Alberto, I'm looking for the hydrant and backflow, the back T, and the road closure fees on the spreadsheet that was sent to us. I'm not seeing it on the spreadsheet. Particularly Public Works looks like it's largely the employee hourly rate adjustments, and I'm not seeing those fees on Public Works. Maybe I'm just missing.
I think they may have been cut off one particular copy. I will, I will take a look at that and find out why.
Okay. Well, that definitely don't present it to the council without those. Do you have a sense of, because those are the ones you called out as ones of interest to us. Do you have a sense of what they are in general? Just a broad sense of them.
I wonder if they were actually hidden, were they? Okay, they were, apologies, they were hidden on the schedule that we presented to the commission. So the fire hydrant use fee is going from $520 and a $3,300-ish deposit to a $520 and a $6,000 deposit. The lost fire hydrant meter fee is going from $1,916 to $3,450. And the lost backflow preventer fee is from $1,050 to $2,000. The back T test is $405. The road closure inspection is $153, and the stormwater quality inspection is $618.
Why would we ever have fees going down? I see some examples where the fees are going down from the current to the proposed. And it just seems like we could keep everything, all of those the same. And I mean, like every little bit counts.
They would go down in cases where our cost to provide the service goes down. We are not allowed to charge more than it costs us. So if perhaps the task was reassigned to a lower level staff member, then that would reduce the staff time portion of it. Do you have a specific one?
I was just, yeah, I was just looking on that same PW tab. There's like management executive goes from 408 to 365, for example, on row 20.
I think that's what happened with that one is, or we have, those are calculated based on averages of the staff that would be normally assigned to that. And if there are newer staff at lower levels or lower salary levels, then that would affect the average.
Okay, thanks. And while I have my mic on, I'm going to ask my broader question, which is that in the staff report, it says that the total revenues from fiscal year 24 and 25 were 13.7 million and 14 million respectively, but in 26 they're 12 and in 27 they're estimated to be the same. And I'm just curious why that number would be going down, especially if many of the rates are going up.
In this case, it's not the rates, it's the level of activity we anticipate being able to provide. So for the particular item, there are yes, there are some community development fees that have gone down, but also the level of service we anticipate providing for those particular fees is less in volume for fiscal year 27.
Can you explain what that means?
So fewer permits would result in less revenue regardless of what the fee was.
I see, so this is related to the conversation that we had at the last Fiscal Commission meeting where we were talking about ways to get more people interested in using parks facilities, for example.
The community development one specifically is building and inspections and plan check type fees versus the parks.
Just seems like a big decrease, so I'm trying to understand it.
It is a large decrease. I don't have the specifics in front of me right now for the projections, but I can definitely expound on that to the commission.
That would be great,
Provide
yeah,
you more
just to
information.
understand that. And if that's something that we can bolster, or if that's an economic change that we're experiencing, but just, I mean, 2 million is a lot, and so trying to really think about what we can do to bring that up if it needs to be brought up, or just address it. Thanks.
Alberto, are all of the fees set to fully recover costs, or are there some that are being subsidized?
The parks and rec fees are set to be partially subsidized. The rest of them are, I believe the rest of them are set to be full recovery. Now, again, as they're built on averages, if someone at the higher end of the average scale is doing the task, then it could be slightly less than would be recovered.
So do we have a policy that says what percentage we are going to subsidize for things like parks?
For the parks one, that is part of their fee study and as well as their pricing model, where I gave the example of the swim lessons, for example.
Kevin, I'll just also add, this was a lot of the discussion at the last meeting. And so there's a report from 2016 that went through what the philosophy should be. And the vote was to continue, that report, I think, did a nice job of laying it out. And the vote at the last meeting was, let's continue with the same philosophy. And then there probably should have been a numbers update between then and now, but there wasn't. And so the fact that a study was just done to update, using that 2016 philosophy to update the fees to today is what the presentation was at the last meeting. And so a lot of the numbers you're seeing here came out of that process, and I think it's a real step forward to get that done and bring the fees back in line with the philosophy that was stated 10 years ago.
Okay, so
Part of the presentation we received last month also showed that some of the types of parks fees that are receiving more of a subsidy than is typical industry-wide, and some are receiving less. So there was a little bit of rebalancing there as well.
and as we talk about the need to replenish our reserves, then obviously that is one area that can be looked at as are we subsidizing the right level based upon our current financial situation? Because there's a difference between theoretically the best place to put it and practically the best place to put it. So, but I don't want to belabor the point since I wasn't here at the last meeting.
And one of the points that was helpful was, for individual fees, you may not want them to go up higher than they are, or you start pricing people out of using things. But if we can get usage up, well, then more revenue's coming in, but the costs of increased usage aren't very high. So if we could get the facilities used more, we bring in more fees, well, some people would be using the facilities, and that's a good. So all of that was part of the focus last time, but raising the fees more may make it inaccessible to people, and we want people to use these things.
One other clarifying question on the tab on the spreadsheet for facilities. I think it's like rows 106 to 110, where the comment on that one is it's the 2026 cost study at 11% recovery. Is that the new fee is getting us 11% cost recovery?
I'm sorry, which one?
It's on, it's on the facilities tab, and it's like row 106 through 110. They're like special event application fees, small event, large event base application, car show application fee. And it says that it's a new fee, 2026 cost study at 11% recovery. And I was curious if that was, if it used to be 11% recovery and we brought it up, or the current new fee is to recover 11% of the cost.
That's part of one of the parks fees, I believe it's, I'm not certain, I believe it's to recover 11% of cost, but I can verify.
Okay. If it's 11% of the cost, just to like piggyback another question, because I saw in the report that like the fees for like noise and street use permits were aligned to be full cost recovery, and the reason stated for that was because it was mainly benefiting the applicant and the event organizer, which I would have thought would apply the same to these fees, because they're like car show application fee, race application fee. And so I just wondered why like that one would be an 11% recovery versus a full cost recovery for like the same reason.
If I recall correctly, these particular ones are more community-based ones for community groups versus the other ones being more for commercial type events.
And also, we do quite a bit of coordination at the staff level across departments when we have an event that we want to make sure everybody's prepared for. It would probably be cost prohibitive to the applicant for every single community event if we charged every single person's time. That may not be the best way for us to get our to provide the services. If the commission feels that you'd like to see more cost recovery on particular things, you could certainly make that suggestion.
I guess my wondering is around the broader conversation around budget, that it does seem that there are hard decisions on the horizon, and that things like the fee recovery and just fee schedule in general might need to be revisited. And just everything might need to be revisited. So I guess that's just a broader question about, I know you have to get these things approved and move things through, but once it's approved, can it be revisited in the context of needing to cut costs in places to balance the budget?
I'll piggyback on that to add something that was said last month, which is 100%. Is 100% of what? Right now we're recovering sort of the immediate transactional costs of having these things open. We're not recovering capital costs and improvements, and when a roof needs replacement and that sort of thing are not factored into these, at least for parks, are not factored into these fees. And so again, it's in our minutes, we encouraged, that is something we ought to be looking at and seeing if we can recover more out of these fees, because we're going to need them as these facilities get older.
My answer to your question about whether or not we can revisit it, the fees can be revisited at any time. They're not limited to a certain time of the year. They can come back to council at any point.
Okay. In the interest of time, since we're getting close to 8, I'm going to ask if we have public comment on this item 16.
Although the fees are not, this particular fee isn't on this list, reiterate the comment I made earlier that the impact fees that we charge for new development are by the lot, as opposed to taking a holistic look at the total project and allowing the developers to make smaller properties. And if a project goes forward, we get the fees. If it doesn't go forward, we don't. The other is, I'm going to read from my public comment from last time. I have a policy change suggestion that I believe will improve the city's finances and also improve the housing crisis situation. Specifically, I believe in this city, where well over half of the residential units are rentals, it's worth saying that rental of housing is probably our biggest industry in Davis, and there's no sales tax on that, so we're not reaping any money from it. Council should seriously consider implementing a per-bed business license tax for all rental units. As an example, a $25 per bed per month tax would generate $300 per year per bed, which translates to $10.5 million each year if there are 35,000 rental beds in the city, and that's probably a good guess. It's a guess, though. More if the tax amount is greater than $25 is implemented. It's something that is not going to be a burden on people who are already paying taxes. And in fact, what we're doing is saying that if you're going to make money from doing business here in the rental marketplace, you should contribute to the financial well-being of the city. So a recommendation from you all to council to consider it, I think would be a very worthwhile idea. Thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, we're getting close to 8 o'clock. I don't think, we've not finished this item, have we? Is there further discussion on this item, or do you need a motion from us on this item?
Yes, yes, the recommendation is whether to review proposed fees and charges and recommend adoption to the city council.
Okay. Do we have further discussion on that, or is that something we're ready to make a motion on?
Yeah, when we make the motion, I'll read from last month's minutes. The line is maintenance gap. The study highlighted a need for dedicated funding mechanisms to address $14.7 million in deferred maintenance and long-term facility replacement, which is not currently factored into the user fees. So I would suggest when we make the motion to advance these fees to the commission with our recommendation, I'm in favor of the fees, pointing out that they don't cover maintenance and long-term facility replacement.
And I think just adding the question that we have outstanding around the community development fees and the $2 million reduction in fees generally from the last 2 fiscal years.
Does that sound reasonable to the rest of the commission?
Is it only deferred maintenance that isn't included in the fees right now? In other words, is overhead fully included, both overhead of the department and overhead of city management, accounting and HR and IT?
Maintenance and operation, if I remember correctly, are not included on this. That would be funded separately.
What do you mean funded separately?
Sorry?
What do you mean funded separately?
Those are typically funded, general fund funded or the park maintenance tax funded. Now, park maintenance tax, granted, does not fund the full park operations, but.
Okay, so I agree with what Mike was saying in terms of moving the recommendation forward with those caveats or with those highlights. So deferred maintenance, but I would also say fully allocated overhead.
You know, and looking at the PowerPoint from the last meeting might be helpful. And I'm forgetting now, we should know it by heart because we talked about this a lot at the Recreation and Parks Commission, but the approach is to well, I'm just going off of memory now. I forget what was in that report, but it's addressed in that report, I know that. So, and it was a very good presentation, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable supporting what you've just suggested, because I think it might be a little bit contrary to what they presented in their report. I believe, my recollection is the intention is not to fully capture the indirect costs when you're with recreation facilities and you have community groups using recreational
So
facilities.
there's nothing wrong with subsidizing it. And so if we say that we should only charge a certain percentage of it, that's fine. But we should know the full cost of charging it anyway. And the full cost is everything. It's deferred maintenance, it's replacement cost, it's overhead, it's everything. I would recommend a full understanding of the accounting before you decide how much to subsidize.
So I can turn that into a motion.
Go for it, please.
So I would move that we recommend that the council adopt the fees that have been presented to us and provide two notes to the council. One is, in the report highlights a $2 million reduction in community development services. I think it's important to flag that for the council as something significant. And the second is that the Parks and Community Services fees are not taking into account right now maintenance, long-term facility replacement, or all of overhead. And again, that's something to flag for the council as an important fact as they consider these fees. With that in mind, though, we would recommend adoption of these fees.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, well, we're at 8 o'clock, so I think if we want to continue further, we have to agree to continue further, unless we want to move, because we have a discussion of the subcommittee and long-range calendar.
I think we're all almost done, and I would recommend we continue.
Okay.
Yeah, we deferred item D from the last meeting because we didn't have a full complement of commissioners.
We still don't.
We still don't.
I would move that we
But maybe we have two people who want to serve on this subcommittee, and so we're at least one commissioner stronger tonight than we were a month ago.
I would move that we keep going despite the time.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the motion.
Oh, the motion was to
Continue D.
Yes.
6D, yes.
We have a motion and a second to continue. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that sounds like unanimous that we'll continue. So we'll go on to item 6D, discussion of appointment of a commission subcommittee to research policies related to city procurement and sharing of immigration-related information.
I was going to defer to you.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Sorry I was a little bit late, but thanks for the great conversation. I know in your last meeting you deferred taking up this item, and I think there wasn't really a consensus around wanting to form it. What I would say, a couple of things. I would say that when we acted, I think we all knew on council that we wanted whatever we were asking of you to be very, very tightly limited. You know, we didn't want to have you undertake a broad, research project. And I've been thinking about it more, and I'll just get right to the chase here. I think really that there's a simpler way to achieve council's goal, and I really think that the liaisons, which would be me and Councilmember Gios, really could just work with Director Preciado and get the information we needed. All that we really wanted was to be sure that we understood whether the city contracted with vendors where really there was this kind of direct provision of information to ICE. And I think it's a simple, really a conversation between us. I don't think it's something that requires a lot of subcommittee work. So I just wanted to lay that out there for you all. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, that simplifies that a bit.
Can I add, though, since you did come in, there was a discussion, I thought it was worth for you to hear, just very briefly, about the audits. I think we got a little bit impatient to learn a little bit more about how things stand now. So the commission asked for the opportunity to meet with the auditors, and we'll probably do that in September. So we may meet with the auditors. We'll probably get the 2024 audit in September. That's why we chose that date, or before that. But we may be asking the auditors about how things are now.
Okay, so I wasn't here,
Right.
and so I don't know how you felt about that. I can offer my own thought.
My sense is that auditors would be happy to meet with the commission and the council, so should the council would desire to meet with them. We set more or less a target for when we thought we would already have fiscal year 24 completed, so that we could discuss fiscal year 24 and then the status quo. Commission, please feel free to correct me and or add your context.
Yeah, that sounds accurate to the discussion, and I think the aim was to, around like the September meeting, was sort of what you were gonna check with them if they'd be available for that meeting.
The only thing I was gonna suggest, and this is kind of coming more from my own professional background and from the generally accepted government auditing standards, there's special rules that apply to the independent auditors regarding communications with the auditee. And we can certainly ask them, and they may be amenable to that, but they probably will have as their first preference direct communication with the council rather than an advisory commission of the council, or both. That's my only thought. They may be a little concerned about not directly communicating with the actual auditee. That's all.
That's fair.
One of the issues is we keep seeing audits about prior years that flag material weaknesses and deficiencies, which raises the question, how are we doing now? A question that is hard to get an answer to right now. So that's where this is coming from. We thought maybe we can meet with them in September and get a better sense of how things are now. If there's a better way to go about this, I think we'd be interested.
Well, I'm not sure if you talked about this, but again, one of the standard practices of any audit, it does include, when the auditors come in and they do each financial statement audit each year, when they do it, they look at prior findings, and they look to see what is the status of prior findings. Also, when auditors do their reporting, depending on the nature of the findings, depending on the nature and the severity of the findings, they sometimes put the auditee on a certain kind of status that requires reporting of your progress in addressing the finding. I'm not sure exactly where we are with any of those as we speak. So there's that. And there's also this really interesting issue that happens when you're a public agency and you're subject to audit. It's not unusual for the public agency. You know, there's a lot of communication that happens between our staff and the auditors during the process. They sometimes discover something. Sometimes we correct it right away or correct it during the pendency of the audit, but sometimes the auditors still report on it even though it's fixed. So there's a lot of different ways things can play out, but certainly the city staff is in a good position to know whether they've taken steps to address a finding, but then again, it would be up to the independent auditors to determine whether they considered those steps to be satisfactory. That's kind of how that process works.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that concludes item 6D. We don't have any subcommittee updates for item 7. And we sort of touched on the long-range calendar already with item 8. But is there any further discussion on long-range calendar? Sounds like September we have something, maybe.
I think we discussed bringing back the single audit report with the additional audits or reports for the NYC and the recommended or required communication.
Okay, and then the special meeting, May 20th, I believe. Presumably 6 p.m., right? Is that good? Okay. Okay, is there any further discussion on item 8 or public comment? Okay, well then, I think we're ready to adjourn the meeting. Thank you guys.